Thank you for joining us for this sermon podcast from United Church on the Green, located in New Haven, Connecticut. No matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are invited and welcome. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to learn more about our open and affirming ministry at United Church on the Green, please visit our website at unitednewhaven.org. Thank you.
A reading from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, verses 23 through 41. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak. For she said, "If I but to touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped. She felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that the power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you, and how can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. So when they had come to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." They laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with them and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk around. She was of 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. My friends, God is still speaking. Let us listen with our hearts. Amen.
Dear God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in our sight, O God, our Redeemer. Amen. You know, this year I was blessed to be able to go over to the Yale commencement wonderful parade as they do for the graduation. And I went over with the nursery school, and so many of our children in the nursery school had a parent who was graduating from Yale. And to see the joy on those children's faces when their mother or their father, as a graduate, walked by and reached out and just touched them, it was absolutely priceless. And it brought back memories of my own growing up. I've shared with some of you before. My dad was a professor and a dean at Williams College, And he always marched also in the academic procession at graduation. And my mother and my brother and I would always come to graduation, and we'd stand there and we'd watch them all go by. But then as soon as my dad came, he'd reach over and touch me, and I would be able to walk with him, hanging on to his Yale blue robe with such pride. But I tell you, the feeling that I had having that touch was so palatable. It was unbelievably special to me. And last month when I married Michael and Zach down in Chattanooga, we had a congregational laying on of hands. And I placed the sign of the cross on their foreheads. You know, that was such a healing, touching blessing. It was absolutely profound. And when my grandson Parker was born, I was so honored to be able to be in the room with my daughter and her husband as Parker was born. And the first touch, maternal touch that Jennifer had as she held Parker, again, it was a healing touch that was something that has stayed with me forever. And you know also, as your pastor, I have spent many days at the bedside of people dying. I'll never forget one time years ago when I was at the bedside of a dying child, and being with the parents and holding them, just touching them through that grief was a healing gesture on my part. Well, all of these are examples of healing touches. Now, of course, none are as powerful as the touch of Christ. But if we truly believe, as I do, that there is Christ in every one of us, a loving touch has a tremendous power to heal. And this is what the gospel was talking about this morning. It is a double healing story. Jesus was often with crowds who were pressing in on him, asking him for miracles, to have healing of some kind, or for words of the kingdom of God. And so in the beginning of these double passages of healing read today, Jesus had just crossed the lake and was once again on the Jewish side. And the crowds gathered around him. Apparently, right away, Jairus, who was a very well-known synagogue leader, you know, he was really a real big shot, came forward and fell at his feet, pleading with him to help heal his 12-year-old daughter. Now, interestingly, this father was risking his office and what his friends might think to ask Jesus for help in his terminally ill daughter. And I have been so touched by the stories of the mothers who have been taken away from their children, doing anything they can in order to provide for their children, to take whatever risks they could to take care of their children. I also just heard now that 4 students from Thailand of the soccer team have just gotten out of that tremendously horrible cave they were in. Just think about what the parents have been going through, waiting to be able to reach out and to touch their child. And the doctors and the paramedics and those brave SEALs who got them out. That touch was a healing touch, a touch of life. Was imperative, just imperative. And Jesus said his daughter was about to die. Come, please come and put your hands on her so that she could be healed and she could live. He knew that Jesus could heal her with his healing touch. And Jesus was already so very well known for this by the time of this story. So what did Jesus do? Jesus ran with him, running and rushing through the crowd. As the crowds pressed in, suddenly he just knew that somebody had touched him. He felt his power move over to someone else. And there was a woman who remains nameless, who had been bleeding for 12 years. Interestingly, 12 years is the same age as Jairus' daughter. She too is unnamed. Because of her bleeding, it was considered by the culture and the Jews of that day to be considered unclean. So no one was to touch her, and she wasn't able to touch anyone else either. It was almost as though they felt those who were unclean could be contagious. It said that they had an invisible sign over their body saying, "Stay away." But she had heard about Jesus. And as she had not gotten help from other physicians, she was thinking that if she could just touch the teeniest bit of his garment, she thought she would be healed. Now, the passage doesn't say this was just a passing thought, but in fact, it was something that she truly believed. She was sure of it. Perhaps she had hoped to just be lost in the crowd, and no one would have even noticed. So she tentatively did reach out and touched just a little bit of the hem of Jesus' garment. And poof, bam, suddenly, all that way, she was no longer invisible, and she was immediately healed. As Jesus recognized power had gone out of him, he turned and he asked, "Who is it that has touched me?" And the woman came forward filled with fear and trembling. Jesus said, daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." In the Message translation, Eugene Peterson translates his words this way: "Daughter, you took a risk of faith, and now you're healed and you are whole. Live well, live blessed, be healed of your plague." Now I ask you, what do these stories say to us today? I am imagining how many of us all want that healing touch, free from homelessness, from hunger, from despair, free to be healed of alcoholism or chemical dependency, healed of depression or loneliness, of hemorrhaging, of cancer, or so many other ills. So you see, this story does speak to all of us, even those with bruised and broken legs, for those who are so hot in their apartment they can't be cool. It speaks to all of us. But I can imagine someone taking this story literally and saying, well, I'm not hemorrhaging, so what does this story have to do with me, right, Tim? But actually, we suffer many things just like the hemorrhages spoken of in this lesson. The anger, the social insecurity, the misunderstanding, the sorrow. But we should trust through faith, and with a positive attitude, many problems can be resolved. We are called to keep trusting. So this unnamed woman was instantly healed, but she was also, believe me, she was terrified. So Jesus called her daughter to banish the fear and complete her restoration. Remember, we are all sons and daughters of our God. And for us, there is the promise of complete restoration. But aren't we all like that? Aren't we at times so very scared? Some desperate, all in need of restoration. And Jesus calls us to risk, to be restored, to be given another chance, a place to live, a job to begin, money in our pockets for the necessities of life, a new identity, the opportunity to begin life anew, a life of forgiveness, a life of peace, and a life of kindness. We can find, if not physical healing, people, an inner healing and inner peace, and it is our faith that will make us well. It is this change that can come from within us that I truly believe is the real miracle here. But our gospel reading doesn't end there. For then the messengers from the synagogue's leader's house came and said to Jairus, "Your daughter is dead. Don't bother the teacher anymore." What did Jesus say? Jesus said, "Don't be afraid. Keep trusting." So this is the second story of the healing this morning. Jesus, Barbara Brown Taylor, who was this famous theologian that used to teach at Yale, observes, then preaches the shortest sermon of Jesus' career. And those are 3 words: do not fear. He says to the grief-bestotten man, only believe, do not fear, only believe. Taylor says the sermon was not just for Jesus' benefit or for Mark's early church, but it's also for all of us who suffer from the human condition and who are up against things that we cannot control. So he goes to the house and he asks them, "Why are you all crying? There was so much chaos that was going on." "This child isn't dead. She is only sleeping," he said. And he took the young 12-year-old's hand and said to her, "Young woman, get up." And she got up and she walked and she ate, like most 12-year-olds. So those are two stories of healing, and both of the women were healed by Jesus' loving, healing touch. His touch is available to us too if we have faith in it. It will heal us from our dis-ease. How can we get that healing touch, you might ask? I truly believe it is by touching one another as Christ is in us all. Healed of our own isolation, our own fear, our own loneliness, even bad blood between people. Healed by faith. Even if our faith is as small and as tiny as a little mustard seed, it can begin to heal the smallest cell in our body, particularly in our spiritual body. Healing can be the restoration of meaning, whatever our physical condition might be. So just as Jairus and the unnamed woman did, we need to reach out and call to God for the help that we need. To be open to that healing touch that is offered to each and to every one of us every day. It is offered to us by our friends, by our family, and certainly by this congregation. And through that, the real restoration of meaning in our lives can happen. Have faith. Don't be afraid, but risk and keep on trusting. Amen.